Here we explain the sliding window approach. We take the first 60 values from the first channel and create the first row of the matrix Z1. Here we are using an example of a window width of 60 and a stride for the sliding window of 1. The next channel in the data set, we take the first 60 values and use those as the first row in the matrix Z2. And for the third channel, we take those 60 values and make those the first row in the matrix Z3. We now slide the window to the right by the stride length, which is 1 in this case. And so now we would be taking data values 2 to 61 and making those the second row in our data set for Z1. We would also do the same for Z2 and Z3 using those channels. We continue to slide the window through our data set by the stride length and create additional rows in our three matrices Z1, Z2, Z3. At the end of this process, each of the Z matrices will be a list of 60 dimensional points, and taken all together, they encode features in high dimensional space. It is this high dimensional space that we then use dimension reduction to reduce down to 2D to create the 2D interfaces. The region highlighted grey in the original signal represents a window of consecutive data points in the three-dimensional signal. Each of the three vectors of data will be a row in each of our three Z matrices and be considered a point in high-dimensional space. Using dimension reduction, we reduce this high-dimensional data to 2D to create a user interface. This video will show the correspondence between original data, high-dimensional space, and the 2D display. We use real data in our example of the 2D display. The sliding window approach will create consecutive vectors in our matrix Z, where the window is from a subset of the original data. As the vectors within a feature like this will show little variance from each other, consecutive vectors yield points close in high-dimensional space, and if the dimension reduction is effective, the points will also be in close proximity in the 2D space. Similar features will cluster in high-dimensional space and project to a cluster in 2D space. As the sliding vector moves out of the feature vector will become more dissimilar to the original cluster and thus move away from that cluster. Indeed, in the 2D projection, we see paths such as the one indicated transitioning between clusters of features. As we encounter a separate feature in the data, since it has similar feature vectors internally, it will create a new cluster. But since it is dissimilar to the original feature, this will be a separate cluster. We saw how two different features map to two clusters of points. Here we see many similar features highlighted. Each of the highlighted regions will be several consecutive windows in the data. Each window will be a single high-dimensional point. Because all of these windows are similar, they will create clusters in overlapping positions in high-dimensional space, leading to a single cluster representing all similar features. If we use an effective dimension reduction technique, our 2D interface should preserve and expose those clusters and relationships, allowing our proposed parallel selections. We use deep convolutional autoencoder as a dimension reduction technique, as it is able to learn complex encodings of the feature space. As is common in machine learning, we use autoencoder to learn an embedding of the feature space and then use a further method such as PCA to take this down to 2D, which we can use to produce the linked interface. We now give an example of a typical interaction with a 1D display to select a common feature throughout a data set. Now we demonstrate the 2D view derived from a dimension reduction of the high-dimensional matrix derived from the sliding window approach. Selecting clusters of points in 2D corresponds to multiple parallel selections in 1D. The user is able to quickly find the cluster corresponding to the target feature. Contrast the speed of this compared to 1D selections. Additional points in the 2D view can be selected or deselected to make fine adjustments to the start and end of the feature. Due to the similarity of vectors in a high-dimensional space, longer duration features are also matched, which is more challenging for the fixed length matching algorithms. This view shows using UMAP for final projection rather than PCA. It has a similar interaction to PCA. This view shows t-SNE for the final projection. It produces a lot of smaller clusters. Each cluster is relatively isolated, but we also see that unlike UMAP and PCA, searching the clusters is less intuitive. From this experience, we would expect t-SNE to perform worse in the user study. PCA offers a relatively intuitive interface. As you move through the 2D view, there is relatively good coherency in the 1D view. This is also apparent for UMAP. We now show a further interactive feature of the software, which is to allow k-nearest neighbour search in real time.